Not very long ago at all, men are trash was a phrase that we would hear over and over and over again. It was a phrase that I found quite triggering personally. That is in part because I definitely have some behaviors that could be considered trash, right? So being called out for that kind of triggered me for sure. What triggered me more was the fact that even though we would all say men are trash, men are trash, men are trash, right? Nobody would ever stop and ask why. Why are men trash, right? It was almost as if we just assumed that being trash was an inherent part of being a man. And of course, I can't speak for all men, but speaking personally, a large part of the reason why I used to behave in trash ways in my past is because deep down I felt like trash. And the reason why deep down I felt like trash is because when I was a little boy, I was discarded by someone who was really important to me like trash. Like I mentioned in a video from earlier this week, our identity is what dictates so many of our behaviors, right? And if a core part of our identity is feeling discarded, if a core part of our identity is feeling like trash, if a core part of our identity is feeling unworthy, then of course we're going to engage in behaviors that validate that identity consciously or unconsciously. And I truly feel like this is why a lot of men, a lot of women, a lot of people in general behave like trash. And in order to stop behaving that way, we have to go back and heal the part of us that felt discarded, right? So that we can recognize that we weren't trash, right? That we didn't deserve to be discarded, and that someone else's actions really is not a reflection on our worthiness at all. One of my core childhood memories is sitting on a porch, kind of similar to the porch that I'm sitting on right now, on a weekend when my father was supposed to come pick me up. You know, him and my mother had separated. He had visitation rights. He could come get me every other weekend. And having spoken to him maybe a day or two before and having him tell me that he's going to come pick me up, right? And me being so excited to see him, so excited to visit him and that side of my family and all the fun things that we would do. So I'd pack up all my clothes in a little plastic bag. And because I just couldn't stand the anticipation of waiting, right, I would come out and sit on the porch and wait for him. And like, this is back in the day before cell phones, so there's no text me when you're on your way or anything like that. You kind of just had to be ready when people pulled up. And I definitely wanted to be ready. So I would pack all my stuff in my little plastic bag, and I would go sit on the porch, and I would just wait for him to show up. And every time I would hear a car coming from behind the tree line, you know, I would get my hopes up, my eyes would open wide, and I'd think it'd be him, and then the car would break the tree line, and I'd see it wasn't him, and then I'd kind of get a little disappointed, but never really fully given up hope, right? So this would go on for half an hour, and then an hour, and then 2 hours, and then I'd try to give him a call, and he wouldn't answer. But I'd still have hope, and so I'd come back outside, and I'd sit some more, and I'd wait, and I'd wait, and I'd wait until eventually my mother would come outside and say, "Michael, he's not coming." And this would happen on more than one occasion, right? It happened several times. And sort of like how I addressed this in one of my earlier videos that, you know, I grew up in a small town. My father never lived more than 5 or 10 minutes away from me, right? So it was never that much of an inconvenience from my perspective for him to come pick me up and spend time with me. But more often than not, he chose not to. And of course, that made me feel discarded. Of course, that made me feel like trash. And of course, it created a lot of not just resentment within me, right? Not just resentment towards him, not just anger towards him, but like resentment and anger towards the world, right? And so going back to those trash behaviors that I've admitted to engaging in the past, I think one of the reasons why we engage in those trash behaviors is because we have a lot of resentment and anger inside, probably directed at one person, right? But maybe we didn't have the words or the opportunity or the courage to express those things to that one person when we were younger. And then when we get older, we start to express it to the world at large. Here are two contradictory statements that are both true. The first is, A part of me longs to know what my life would have been like had my father been a consistent presence in my life. For better or worse, for richer or for poor, just to know what it would have felt like to have a father growing up. The second statement is, I am incredibly grateful that I didn't have my father as a consistent presence in my life. I'm incredibly grateful that I did have to learn what it means to be a man on my own, because that allowed me to become my own man. And one of the things I realized while doing this inner work to heal this wound, to heal this abandonment wound, to heal this wound of being discarded and feeling unworthy, is the fact that had my father been around the way that I wanted him to be, I probably would have turned out a lot more like him than I already did, and not even to bash him or anything like that, but the experiences I've been allowed to have, right? The places that life has taken me, the things that I've learned, so much of what's made my life so broad and rich happened directly because I didn't have someone like him influencing me and someone like him telling me, well, this is what I would do, or this is what I did, or not even telling me, right? But just me watching him and his behaviors and me wanting to model myself after him just because he's my father, right? So in a roundabout way, it was a blessing in disguise. And I think it's a major blessing, especially for those of us who are committed to doing healing work, and especially to those of us who feel called to help others heal, right? Because I see it as an initiation of sorts. It's an initiation into self-love, because once you're rejected by the person you love the most, once you're discarded by the person who you want to be connected with the most, right? Then you absolutely have to learn what it actually means to love yourself. I think, when people are around us all the time and, even if they don't have real love for us, if they just pretend to love us, if they just pretend to care for us, if they pretend to support us, right? It can often become a crutch for us to lean on so that we never have to do those things ourselves. And again, I'm not trying to act like, it is totally 100% cool to grow up without a father or a mother or another important person in your life. I do think there's a lot of value in those things, and that, for the average person, that's probably exactly what you need, right? That support system. But I do think for some of us, for a select few of us, it's a major blessing, and it's a part of our destiny to not have that, because it kind of forces us into this training to really learn not just what self-love looks like, right? But what love itself looks like. And for us to take that, to first find it within ourselves, to foster it, right? And then to spread it with the world at large. So what do you do when the person you love the most discards you? I think what we do at first is that we become upset. We become bitter. We become ashamed. We become confused. We become angry, right? We want to project the pain that they caused us back onto them and onto other people. I think that goes on for a while, until we decide that we want to commit to healing, until we decide to love ourselves, until we decide that we're not going to allow someone else's actions to dictate the path of our lives, right? And once we arrive at that point, what we do when the person we love the most discards us is we say thank you. We say we appreciate it, right? We show gratitude. We broaden our perspective, right? And get out of that victim mindset to say, oh, well, you did this to me, and this is why I'm X, Y, and Z, and this is why I do these things, and this is why I can't have these things, right? That victim story, that victim narrative. We drop that, right? We take a step back and we look at all the positive things that can come from it as well. And I think the number one positive thing that can come from it is they allow you to become the person that you're destined to be on your own without their influence, right? And for so many of us, especially for people who would discard a child, right? Why would you want to be influenced by a person like that? Why would you want to have a person like that within your orbit to kind of put those same behaviors and beliefs and values onto you, right? Why would you want that? You wouldn't, right? So if the person you love the most has discarded you, I encourage you, I invite you to look at it from a different perspective and perhaps be grateful for it, because he may have given you something incredible and something that, you can take and use to evolve into the exact person you're always meant to be. So my name is Michael Sinclair. I'm a growth guide. This week on the channel, we're talking about worth and worthiness, and I got a couple more videos planned. So if this sort of stuff interests you, I hope that you'll stick around. But if I don't see you again, I hope that you got some value out of this video. I hope that it served you. And until we meet again, peace.